My name is Janet Walker, and a few months ago, I was called a freeloader in my own home. The words came from my son's new wife, Sabrina, and I can still remember the smirk on her face when she said it. "It must be nice," she told me, "to live off your son's money and not have to lift a finger." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just smiled and walked away because I knew one day she'd learn the truth. For 30 years, I worked as a school teacher. I raised my son, Michael, alone after his father passed away. We lived a simple life, never rich but full of love and hard work. Every dollar I saved went toward one thing, this house. It was the home I built for my family, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. When Michael got married, I welcomed his new wife with open arms, hoping we could live together peacefully. But instead, my home became a place where I was made to feel like a burden. The more I tried to stay out of their way, the more she found reasons to belittle me. She looked at my old clothes, my thrift store dishes, my quiet way of living, and she thought that made me weak. She thought I was dependent. She had no idea that everything around her, every lamp, every chair, every tile beneath her expensive shoes, belonged to me. That's why I didn't get angry that day. I just thought, you'll find out soon enough. Because respect can't be forced. It comes from truth. And when the day finally came that she learned who really owned the house, it didn't take shouting or revenge. The truth spoke for itself. Before I tell you how that happened, make sure to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories like this reach, and whether you've ever had someone mistake your kindness for weakness. Before Sabrina moved in, my life was quiet, peaceful. I spent my mornings watering the garden, listening to the birds, and reading in the sunroom my husband built before he passed. My son Michael was my pride and joy, kind, hardworking, and grateful. When he told me he'd met someone, I was thrilled for him. He'd been alone for years, always putting work before love. When I met her, Sabrina seemed charming and polite, though a little too proud of the car she drove and the brand names she wore. Still, I thought she was just young. I thought time and family would soften her. When they got married, I insisted they stay here until they could find their own place. I thought it would help them save money. Michael agreed, but I could see Sabrina's smile tighten when he told her. She said, "Oh, that's sweet, but won't your mom feel awkward living with newlyweds?" I brushed it off. "This house has enough love for all of us," I said. I believed it too. At first, things went smoothly. I cooked dinner for them, helped wash dishes, and even ironed Michael's shirts for work. I wanted Sabrina to feel comfortable, to see me as family, not competition. But she started to change within weeks. She began calling me Janet instead of Mom. She'd make little jokes about my habits, how I reused grocery bags, how I preferred cooking from scratch instead of ordering food. One afternoon, she walked into the kitchen, looked around and said, "You really need to let me redecorate. This house looks like a time capsule." I smiled politely and said, "Maybe, but it's my time capsule." She laughed, but it wasn't kind. Michael never saw the full extent of it. She was careful when he was home, sweet voice, gentle smiles. But when it was just the two of us, she'd sigh dramatically when I entered the room, or talk on the phone, loud enough for me to hear her say things like, "It's so weird living with his mom. I feel like we're babysitting." I tried to keep peace. I told myself she was young and didn't understand what it meant to build a home with your own hands. But every day, she chipped away at my patience. The final straw came one evening during dinner. I had cooked her favorite dish, roasted chicken with lemon and herbs. As I placed the plate in front of her, she said, "You really don't need to cook for us. Michael's the one paying for the groceries anyway." Michael looked embarrassed and said, "Sabrina, that's not fair." She waved him off. "It's fine. I just think she should relax. Enjoy her retirement. We'll handle the bills." I stayed quiet, but my hands trembled under the table. I wanted to tell her the truth, that every bill in that house was paid by me from a lifetime of savings, that her so-called husband's money wasn't what kept the lights on or the mortgage cleared. But I swallowed the words, not out of weakness, but out of choice. I knew arguing wouldn't change anything. I'd let time do the talking. That night, I went to bed with a heavy heart, but not anger. I prayed for patience, and I reminded myself of something my late husband used to say: you don't have to fight for respect. The truth always walks in, sooner or later. And in this house, it was already walking up the driveway, just waiting for the right moment to knock. A few days after that dinner, the tension in the house grew heavier. I could feel it in the way Sabrina moved. Quick, restless, always on her phone, always sighing when I was nearby. She started taking over the house like it was hers to run. She ordered new curtains, rearranged the furniture I had for 20 years, and replaced the family photos on the hallway shelf with framed pictures of herself and Michael from their honeymoon. I didn't say a word, though each change felt like an erasure of the life I had built. Michael tried to balance things between us, but he was busy with work. He left early every morning and came home late, often exhausted. When he was around, Sabrina played the role of the sweet, supportive wife. She'd hold his arm, laugh at his jokes, and cook fancy meals she found online. The moment he left, she'd drop the act and complain. She hated how old-fashioned the house looked, how quiet the neighborhood was, and most of all, how I was always there. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. She was in the kitchen talking loudly as I folded laundry in the living room. "Yeah, we live in his mom's house," she said with a laugh. "It's exhausting. She doesn't pay for anything, and she still acts like she owns the place." Those words hit harder than she could imagine. I stood there, frozen, holding one of Michael's shirts in my hands. I wasn't angry because of what she said. It was because she truly believed it. All these years of saving, of working 2 jobs after my husband's death, of cutting every corner to pay off this mortgage, and she thought I was just a guest living off my son. That evening, Michael came home from work to find Sabrina sitting on the couch, scrolling through her tablet. I was setting the table for dinner, as I always did. She didn't look up when I spoke to her. "Sabrina, would you like chicken or pasta tonight?" I asked politely. "I'm fine," she said flatly. "We already ordered takeout. Michael prefers something lighter." I glanced at Michael, and he looked uncomfortable. "Mom, you didn't have to cook tonight," he said softly. "I know," I replied, forcing a smile, "but I like cooking for my family." Sabrina finally looked up, her tone sharp. "Family is great, but at some point, we'll need our own space. You've had this house for so long. Maybe it's time you think about downsizing or moving closer to your friends." Michael's head turned quickly toward her, surprise in his eyes. "Sabrina," she shrugged, "I'm just saying it might be better for everyone." I felt my throat tighten. It wasn't just disrespect, it was dismissal. She was trying to push me out of the home I had built from nothing. But instead of losing my temper, I simply sat down at the table and looked her in the eye. "This house has always had space for family, Sabrina," I said calmly. "It's what makes it a home. But if it's too crowded for you, that's something you and Michael can decide." Michael put his hand on mine under the table, a quiet apology. Sabrina rolled her eyes and went back to her phone. The rest of the night was silent. After that, she stopped pretending to be polite. She would make sarcastic comments whenever I was nearby. When I brought in groceries, she'd say, "Oh, using Michael's card again?" If I paid a bill, she'd joke, "Guess my husband is funding everything." The irony made me almost laugh sometimes. If only she knew whose money kept this house running. I started noticing that she would accidentally misplace my mail, use my laundry detergent, and even invite her friends over without asking. One Saturday morning, I came downstairs to find 3 of her friends drinking wine in the living room, their heels digging into the rug my husband had bought before he passed. They were laughing about some reality show when Sabrina said, "Ladies, welcome to our home. Don't mind the old decor. It came with the previous generation." Her words were coated with sugar but sharp underneath. I quietly took my gardening gloves and went outside. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me react. Out in the garden, I clipped roses until my hands ached. The air smelled of wet earth and blossoms, and for a moment, I let the anger melt into determination. I realized something. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't need to shout or prove a point. Life has a way of revealing truth without you lifting a finger. That night, as I sat in the living room alone, I looked around the house. The walls I'd painted, the furniture I'd chosen, the memories in every corner. It wasn't pride I felt. It was gratitude. Gratitude that I'd built something real, something lasting. I whispered quietly to myself, "You can't take away what you didn't build." When I heard Sabrina's laughter echo down the hall, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt patient, because deep down, I knew her arrogance would come with a price. And when that price came due, it would be paid not in anger, but in truth. The turning point came one Saturday morning when Michael had to leave for a week-long business trip. He kissed me on the cheek before he left and said, "Take it easy, Mom. Don't let Sabrina overwork herself." I smiled, knowing full well that Sabrina didn't even lift a finger around the house. Once he was gone, the air inside felt different, quieter. Without Michael's calming presence, Sabrina's mask slipped completely. That very day, she began moving things around again. She told me she wanted to modernize the space before her friends came over for brunch. I didn't argue. I just watched as she replaced my soft lace curtains with bright white blinds and shoved my husband's old armchair into the garage. I stood in the doorway and said gently, "That chair's been here longer than both of us." She didn't look up from her phone. "Exactly," she said, "and it's about time it left." By noon, her guests arrived. 3 women dressed in expensive clothes carrying handbags that probably cost more than my car. They laughed loudly, complimented Sabrina on her house, and toasted to her successful life. I stayed in the kitchen, washing dishes just to keep busy, but their voices carried easily through the walls. "This place is gorgeous," one woman said. "You're so lucky, Sabrina." "Oh, thanks," she replied proudly. "Michael wanted something comfortable for us. We might renovate soon, though. You know how men are, always attached to their childhood homes." My hands tightened around the dish towel. Childhood home? This wasn't Michael's childhood home. It was mine. I had bought it years after my husband's death, using the life insurance money and every penny of my savings. Michael had been an adult by then. He never paid a dime toward it. But she was speaking like everything here, every wall, every flower outside, belonged to her and my son. When her friends left, she strutted around like a queen, humming and smiling to herself. Then she sat at the dining table with her laptop and started adding things to her online cart. New furniture, decor, and even a luxury coffee machine. I noticed the total climbing quickly. "That's quite the shopping list," I said softly. "Michael will be surprised." She looked up, irritated. "Michael doesn't care. He told me to get whatever I like." Then she hit checkout. A moment later, her brow furrowed. She clicked again. The same message popped up. Declined. She tried another card. Declined again. Her confidence started to fade. I could see the frustration building in her face. She sighed, muttered something under her breath, and grabbed her phone. I pretended to wipe the counter while listening. "Hi. Yes, I'm calling about my card. It's not working," she said. There was a pause, and her expression changed from annoyed to confused. "What do you mean it's been frozen?" "No, that's impossible." Another pause. "Unpaid balances? There must be a mistake." When she hung up, her face was pale. She marched into the living room and snapped, "Janet, do you know if Michael's been having issues with his accounts? My cards aren't working, and the bank says they've been suspended." I looked up from the tea I was making and said quietly, "Maybe you should ask the person who handles the bills." "I'm asking you," she said sharply. "You live here, don't you? You should know if there's some issue." I took a sip of tea and said, "I do know. There's no issue." Her voice rose. "Then why are my cards declined? Why can't I make any purchases?" I walked to the side table, opened the drawer, and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of property documents, tax receipts, and mortgage papers. I laid them out on the table one by one. Each bore my name, Janet Walker, bold and clear at the top. She frowned. "What is this?" "This," I said, my voice steady, "is proof of who owns this house. I bought it 15 years ago. I paid every cent myself. Your husband doesn't pay the mortgage because there isn't one. There hasn't been one for a decade." Her eyes flicked from page to page. "That can't be right," she whispered. "Oh, it's right," I said. "Every time you've bragged to your friends about your beautiful home, you were standing in my home. Every time you accused me of living off my son, you were living off me." She stood frozen. her hands trembling slightly as she looked down at the paper. Her face went pale, then red. "Why didn't you tell me?" I smiled faintly. "Because you never asked. And because sometimes silence teaches louder than words." She didn't respond. For the first time, Sabrina had nothing to say. She gathered her things and disappeared into her room. I could hear drawers opening and closing, maybe tears, maybe anger. I didn't follow. I simply sat down in my husband's old chair, the one she'd pushed aside, and turned on the lamp. The warm light filled the room, wrapping me in a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. That night, the house was completely quiet. No snide remarks, no fake laughter, no footsteps rushing down the hall. I didn't feel triumphant, only calm. The truth had done its job. When Michael came home a few days later, I knew he would find out what had happened. But this time, I wasn't nervous. I didn't need to explain or defend myself. The truth had already spoken, and it had spoken with dignity. When Michael returned from his trip, he seemed relaxed and cheerful. He walked through the door with flowers in one hand and a suitcase in the other, calling out, "Honey, I'm home." Sabrina appeared from the hallway, but her expression was uneasy. She gave him a half-hearted hug and took the flowers without a word. I was in the kitchen preparing tea when I heard the change in his tone. "Is everything all right?" he asked. "You seem quiet." I could hear her pacing before she spoke. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice trembled slightly. I stayed out of sight, not wanting to intrude, but every word reached me clearly. Sabrina told him about the credit cards being declined, the call with the bank, and then, slowly, about the documents I'd shown her. Her voice was a mix of confusion, shame, and disbelief. "I thought this house was yours," she said quietly. "I thought your mom was living here because she didn't have anywhere else to go." Michael didn't speak right away. I could imagine his expression, calm but disappointed. Finally, he said, "Sabrina, how could you think that? My mom bought this house before I even started my career. She worked her entire life for it. You've been living under her roof, not mine." She started to cry, saying she didn't mean to hurt anyone, that she was just frustrated, that she hadn't realized how cruel she sounded. Michael sighed heavily. "I love you," he said, "but I can't defend what you did. You've disrespected the woman who gave me everything." He came into the kitchen a few minutes later. His face said more than his words could. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I don't know what she said to you, but I can guess." I smiled and poured him a cup of tea. "You don't owe me an apology, Mike. You didn't do anything wrong." He shook his head. "I should have seen it sooner. You shouldn't have had to deal with that alone." I placed my hand over his. "You raised yourself to be kind. That's all the thanks I'll ever need." That evening, Sabrina came into the kitchen. Her eyes were red from crying, and her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Janet, can we talk?" she asked. I nodded and gestured for her to sit down. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, in a small voice, she said, "I'm sorry. I really am. I've been awful to you. I thought you were living here because Michael felt obligated to take care of you. I thought you didn't have anything, and I was proud of how far I'd come. I guess I wanted to feel like I belonged here too." Her words didn't excuse her behavior, but they showed something I hadn't seen before. Honesty. She wasn't defensive. She looked ashamed. "Sabrina," I said gently, "this house was built for family, not pride. You do belong here. You just forgot that belonging doesn't mean owning." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You didn't deserve the way I treated you. I was jealous of the respect Michael has for you. I thought I had to compete." I reached across the table and touched her hand. "Respect isn't a competition. You earn it by how you treat people, not by what you own." We sat there quietly for a moment, the air heavy, but calm. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a start. Later that night, Michael found me sitting in the garden. The evening air was cool, and the scent of the roses filled the space around us. He sat beside me and said, "She told me everything. I think she finally understands." I nodded, staring at the sunset. Understanding is the first step. We all say things we regret. The important part is what we do afterward. He smiled faintly. "You're a better person than most people deserve, Mom." I chuckled softly. "I'm not better. I just learned that sometimes the best way to teach is by staying silent until the truth speaks for itself." Over the next few weeks, I noticed a real change in Sabrina. She began helping around the house, washing dishes, cleaning the kitchen, even tending the garden with me. At first, it felt strange, but she didn't do it out of guilt. She did it because she wanted to. She started talking to me differently too, with warmth instead of distance. One afternoon, as we planted new roses, she said, "You know, I used to think money was what made people strong, but watching you, I realized strength looks quieter than I thought." I smiled. Real strength doesn't need to be loud. It just lasts longer. That evening, she cooked dinner and set the table herself. When Michael came home, she greeted him with a hug and whispered something in his ear that made him glance at me and smile. During dinner, she lifted her glass and said, "To family and to learning what really matters." I raised my glass too, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The house felt like home again, not because I had proven a point, but because respect had finally returned to its rightful place. Before the night ended, Michael quietly said, "Mom, you'll always be the heart of this house." And for the first time in a long while, I felt peace. That was the night I realized something simple but powerful. You don't have to fight to be seen. You just have to stand firm in who you are. The world has a way of revealing truth, even when you say nothing. Respect isn't about wealth or age. It's about character. And character, like a house built with love, stands firm no matter how strong the wind blows. Life in the house slowly returned to peace after that night. It wasn't instant, but something inside the walls seemed lighter, like the air had shifted. The tension that once crept into every conversation was gone. There were still quiet moments, awkward pauses, and the occasional glance that carried old memories. But there was also something new, effort, real effort to make things right. Sabrina began to change in small, genuine ways. The first morning after our talk, I found her in the kitchen early, trying to make breakfast. The smell of burnt toast filled the air, and she looked embarrassed when I walked in. "I thought I'd surprise you," she said with a shy smile. I laughed softly and helped her start over. It was the first time in months that the kitchen felt warm again. We made pancakes together, the way I used to make them for Michael when he was little. She listened carefully as I told her the recipe, and for once, she didn't interrupt or rush ahead. Days turned into weeks, and she started joining me in the garden too. She'd kneel beside me, wearing those bright gloves I'd bought years ago, and ask about each plant like she truly wanted to learn. "You really love this garden, don't you?" she said once. I nodded. "It's the one thing that never talks back, but always gives back." She smiled at that, and I realized she wasn't mocking me anymore. She was understanding me. Michael noticed the change as well. He looked happier than I'd seen him in a long time. Sometimes I'd catch him watching Sabrina and me from the porch, smiling quietly as we worked side by side. He didn't say much, but I knew what he was thinking. Peace in the home was worth more than anything else. One Sunday evening, we sat down for dinner together, all three of us. The table looked beautiful, fresh flowers in a small vase, candles burning low, and the smell of roasted chicken filling the air. Sabrina had cooked it herself. As we ate, she looked at me and said, "Janet, I know I've said this before, but I really want you to know I'm sorry. I don't know what I was trying to prove. I just wanted to feel like I belonged, and instead, I made you feel unwelcome in your own home." Her words were honest. This time, I could hear the sincerity in them. I reached across the table and placed my hand over. "You do belong here, Sabrina. I never wanted to be above you. I just wanted a family that respected each other. This house means nothing without love inside it." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Michael reached for her hand, too, and for the first time, the table didn't feel divided. It felt whole. After dinner, while they cleaned up, I stepped outside into the garden. The sky was fading into a soft orange glow. The roses were in full bloom, their petals glistening in the evening light. I sat down on the bench my husband built years ago and thought about everything that had happened. It amazed me how life has its own way of teaching lessons without needing revenge or loud words. Sometimes, all you have to do is stay quiet long enough for truth to rise on its own. I realized then that I wasn't angry at Sabrina anymore. In a strange way, she'd reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that love and respect aren't inherited, they're chosen, Every generation has to learn that lesson on its own. Over the next few months, Sabrina began calling me Mom. The first time she said it, I almost didn't respond. It felt foreign at first, but then warm, comforting. One evening, she even brought me a small, framed picture, a photo of the three of us standing together in the garden. On the back, she'd written, "Our home." I smiled as I read it because it wasn't just about ownership anymore. It was about belonging, forgiveness, and growth. The house that once echoed with tension now filled with laughter. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee in the mornings, and the living room often played soft music instead of silence. Sabrina even started volunteering at the community center where I used to work, helping other young women learn budgeting and household management. One day she said to me, "I used to think money was the only way to build a future. Now I see it's character that keeps it standing." Her words made my heart. That was the kind of lesson I couldn't have taught her with anger. It had to come from experience. In time, Michael and I decided to add both of their names to the deed, not because I needed to, but because I wanted them to understand what it means to build something together. It wasn't about power or pride, it was about family. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, I watched them from the porch. Sabrina was laughing as Michael chased her across the yard with a watering can. The sound of their laughter filled the air, and for the first time in a long while, I felt my husband's presence in that piece. I knew he would have been proud of how we all found our way back to each other. I've learned that life has a way of humbling people who mistake kindness for weakness. But if you hold your head high and let time reveal the truth, you'll never have to shout to be heard. Respect, once lost, can be earned again, but only when someone is willing to change. As I look back now, I realize the greatest inheritance I could ever give my son wasn't a house or money. It was the lesson of dignity, patience, and unconditional love. And in the end, those are the things that truly make a home. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever had someone underestimate you, share how you proved your worth without saying a single word, because sometimes silence is the loudest truth of all.